So I'm not entirely sure how well this video is going to go over, whether people are going to agree with me, whether people are going to just tell me to shut up, or what. But basically, I want to make a video just talking about what I believe to be one of the biggest issues with Superman and Lois at the moment, and that's the fact that it feels like they are just completely ignoring everything to do with Supergirl like the plague. Now, obviously, in the next episode, we'll be getting our first Arrowverse character showing up, which is John Diggle, and I know that a lot of people are actually annoyed at this, that they feel like Superman and Lois just need to stay as far away from all of this stuff as possible. I respect that. I completely understand why you would feel that way. I personally, though, think that it's a little bit offensive that they're just completely ignoring Supergirl and everything to do with the show. Now, some of the writers on the show have actually said why they haven't addressed Supergirl or why they haven't addressed that, and it basically came down to two things, and one of those was COVID and the other was just time restraints in terms of the episodes, when they needed to meet a certain time constraint, and having references in the Kara in there didn't fit with that. Now, COVID makes perfect sense for why physical appearances aren't happening. I don't blame the show at all for that. That's not their fault. The only reason David Ramsey is able to show up across these shows like he is because he's not tied to any show at the moment. Like, he doesn't have to be a regular on any other show at the moment. So, like, for example, I'm pretty sure the whole thing at the moment is you need to quarantine 2 weeks before going onto the set of another show, and then you need to constantly get tested while you're on that show. So, for example, with David Ramsey, he'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks before going onto the set of Superman and Lois, then he can leave, and then he'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks before he goes over to whatever the next episode he's in is, or whatever the next episode he's filming is. Whereas with Melissa, for example, if Melissa was going to show up in Superman and Lois, say that the season final of Superman and Lois, she would have to leave the set of Supergirl, then quarantine for 2 weeks before joining the set of Superman and Lois, then spend, say, a week and a half filming on Superman and Lois, then she'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks again before she can go back to the Supergirl set. That just is completely impractical. I completely understand why they don't want to do that, because that delays Supergirl filming by like a month and a half, and by that point the whole show would have to be delayed because they're not going to meet certain air dates for episodes. So I understand why they're not doing that. It's things like referencing characters or referencing little things at all doesn't make sense. And they've said as well that they don't want to say something that contradicts Supergirl, but I mean, there's so many easy ways you could make a little reference or shout out something from Supergirl's show or shout out Kara without breaking any kind of continuity. And the biggest problem here, in my opinion, is that when they first came out, when some of the writers came out and said why they haven't been addressing Supergirl at all, they said that at the end of episode 2 originally, when Lois is quitting the Daily Planet and packing up, she would pick up a picture of herself, Clark, and Kara, and she'd stick that in the box and leave. But the reason why it was cut out is because of time constraints. That is so much bullshit, okay? Because we know that there are extended cuts of the episodes that are on the CW app, that are on the streaming service, and that are international. We know that there's no time constraints on the extended cuts of the episodes, or at the very least, they're a lot more lenient on time constraints than they are on the CW. And if you're actually, I think when they're airing an episode, it needs to hit like 41 minutes and 45 seconds or 41 minutes and 50 seconds. If you're putting the episode up on the CW app, or if you're putting the episode up on any other streaming site, normally it's like you can go anywhere from 42 minutes to 46 or 47 minutes, because some of the episodes we've gotten, the extended cut has been like 3 or 4 minutes longer. So we know that there are a lot more leniency in terms of time constraints on the streaming versions of the episodes. So if you want to cut the little references from the broadcast version, then go ahead, do it. But then don't say that you can't have them at all, because you could easily put them in the streaming versions of the episodes. Like leaving that little picture of Kara in there for the streaming cut of the episode, perfect. That would have been so cool. This is something that I feel like has just gone a little bit worse as the season went on. At the beginning it was like, alright, well, maybe they didn't need to reference her there, that's fine. Maybe we'll hear about her in a little bit, maybe we'll hear about her in a following episode. But the most recent episode, which is episode 11, had 25 minutes devoted to the early years of Clark and to all the flashbacks and stuff. And now technically the early parts of all that flashback stuff, Kara wouldn't have been around on Earth yet. Assuming that Crisis kind of made it so that Kara lands on this Earth around the same time she landed on her own Earth, then we can assume she didn't show up until like I want to say mid-2000s-ish. We probably have an exact date out there somewhere, but I think Clark's first year as Superman is 2002. So I'm assuming Kara didn't show up till a little bit after that. But there's something that I noticed is that they just completely skip over the Supergirl version of Superman's costume, and I get why they would do that for a bunch of reasons. I'm assuming that Tyler has bulked up a lot for Superman and Lois, so he probably doesn't even fit into that costume anymore. That costume was clearly made to just look very similar to Supergirl's. It wasn't meant to stand on its own as like its own main costume for their show or whatever, but in my opinion, they could have easily fit that in somewhere, something in just a little nod to say this costume still existed. Instead, they went from the Fleischer costume right to the current costume without really leaving any room in there to show us the costume he wore for years on Supergirl in crossovers. Because the end of Crisis, he still wears that costume, so I think we can assume that he wore that costume still at some point on Earth Prime. Then there's a whole thing with Jimmy as well, where we got a reference to Jimmy. We saw a picture he took of Superman, and that picture isn't the one that we saw on Supergirl where he said it was the first picture he ever took. Now, obviously, that's easily just, thrown aside. You can just say, while Jimmy still took that picture from Supergirl as the first picture he took of Superman, this one is completely different, or whatever. But I feel like it would have been a nice little nod to Supergirl fans if you'd left that picture in there as something and been like, look, he took this picture, this is the first one he took of Superman, we're staying in continuity with Supergirl. And there's just a lot of things, like they could have easily shouted out Kara 101 times without breaking any continuity. Like, for example, if Lois and Clark are just talking about the kids or whatever, or just talking about doing something around the Smallville farm, they could be like, oh, remember when Kara was here? Or Kara was good at that, or something silly like that, just to reaffirm to us that Kara still exists, because it really feels like they're just making this show or writing this show and pretending that the Supergirl show never happened, or pretending that Kara doesn't exist, and that's a little bit annoying to me. What it feels like at the moment, it feels like Supergirl is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or Supergirl is the Marvel Netflix shows, and Superman and Lois are the MCU movies. And in that I mean that Supergirl references Superman and Lois a lot, or at least references Superman a lot, whereas Superman and Lois, which is the MCU movies, doesn't actually reference anything from the TV shows. So it's a very one-way mirror where, they're technically canon, but only one show is actually doing the job to show that they're canon. And that's a little bit annoying to me. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is something a lot of people agree on. I might be coming off very kind of pretentious and annoying and just kind of like, why don't you reference another show kind of thing? And I get that. I also completely believe that Superman and Lois is attempting to stand on their own 2 feet as much as possible. But I just feel like a single shout out to Kara, just a single shout out over 11 episodes, like one single shout out to Kara over 11 episodes would have been very doable, and is something that would have taken the tiniest of effort to do, and the fact that they didn't is a little bit insulting. I feel like to her show for being the ones to establish Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch as Clark and Lois and all that sort of stuff. I don't know who's responsible for just deciding not to make any reference to it at all. It's likely that they're just trying to make this as welcoming newcomers as possible. But I mean, if that was the case, we wouldn't be seeing David Ramsey next episode. So I don't know. It's a little bit strange to me. It feels a little bit annoying. But how do you feel about that? Do you agree with me? Do you think we should have heard something about Supergirl? Do you think that they should just keep doing what they're doing and act like she doesn't exist? Let me know in the comments anyway. And if you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and all of that. And I hope you have a great day.